Marcus Hale was 39 years old the night his ex-wife stood in front of 200 people and told them all exactly what kind of man she believed him to be. She had a microphone. She had champagne. She had the easy confidence of someone who had never once been wrong about anything, at least not in a room where it mattered. He had a folding chair near the back, a cup of punch that had been sitting too long, a name badge that still read his old job title, the one from a decade ago, because the reunion committee had used the last yearbook and nobody had thought to update the records. To everyone in that ballroom at the Jefferson Crown Hotel in Charlotte, Marcus Hale looked like a man who had not quite arrived, a structural engineer who worked contracts, drove a sensible car, kept to himself. Her friends had always called him Quiet Marcus, and she had never thought to correct them either. She laughed when she saw him from across the room. A specific kind of laugh, practiced and loud and meant to be overheard. She turned to the woman beside her and said something that made them both look at him. He noted it. He did not look away. What Danielle Parrish Hale did not know, what she had not bothered to find out in the 8 years since the divorce was finalized, was that the car idling in Valet Lane 3 outside that hotel had cost $3.2 million, and the keys were in Marcus Hale's jacket pocket. What happened next would cost her far more than a car. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The morning of the reunion, Marcus had risen before 6. He did what he always did on days that mattered. He made coffee, pressed it slow in the French press his grandmother had left him when she passed. Heavy ceramic, the kind built to last, with a hairline crack near the base that he had repaired with food-grade epoxy and a steady hand. She had told him once, sitting at her kitchen table in Greensboro with the kind of certainty that only old women earn, "Slow hands build the thing that stands. Fast hands build excuses." He had been 16. He had not understood it then. He understood it completely now. He sat with the mug cradled in both hands in the workshop he had converted from the garage of his home in Dilworth, and he looked at the drawings tacked to the corkboard above the drafting table. 3 separate projects: a residential bridge commission in the mountains outside Asheville, a commercial retrofit downtown, and the third, the one nobody outside his team knew about yet, a mixed-use development on 11 acres of East Charlotte land that he had purchased quietly, incrementally, through a property LLC that bore no version of his name. The workshop smelled of sawdust and drafting pencil and machine oil. He had built the cabinets himself, the shelving, the long table where he did his structural calculations by hand before running the computer models. Not because he had to, because it kept him honest about what he was actually building. Marcus had met Danielle in their junior year at Westbrook High. She had been the kind of beautiful that made a room rearrange itself, and she had noticed him not despite his quietness, but because of it. He used to think that was love. He understood later it was strategy. She was drawn to still water because still water was easy to read, easy to cross. She had not considered that still water could also run very deep. They married at 25. He took contracts, built his reputation steadily, saved carefully. She grew accustomed to a comfortable life. Then she grew impatient with a comfortable life. By year 6 of the marriage, she had begun spending time with a man named Garrett Forsyth, commercial real estate. Porsche Cayenne, a LinkedIn profile that described him as a visionary, and by year 7 Marcus had noticed the specific quality of her attention when her phone buzzed, the way she turned it face down without thinking, the way she laughed at things Garrett apparently said that she would not share. He had not confronted her, he had watched. That was the habit of a structural engineer. You observed the load, you assessed the stress points. You did not declare the bridge unsafe until you had the data to support the finding. The data came on a Thursday evening in the fall of what would be their final year. He had come home from a site visit 2 hours early and found the house too quiet in a way that did not match her car in the driveway. He stood in the kitchen and listened, and in the listening, he understood everything. His hands did not shake. They rarely did. He did not walk upstairs. He walked back out to his truck and sat in the driveway for 7 minutes. He was not processing emotion. He was deciding on sequence. An engineer did not start tearing out the foundation because he was upset. He pulled the drawings. He identified the compromised load-bearing elements. He made a plan. That weekend, while Danielle was at a friend's bridal shower, he had confirmed she was actually there, had texted to check, had noted the timestamp of her reply and cross-referenced it with what her location sharing showed on the family plan. Marcus sat at his desk and went through 3 months of bank statements for the joint accounts. He found the pattern inside 45 minutes. She had been moving money. Slowly, the way you move furniture when you do not want to wake someone, one piece at a time, close to the floor. Small transfers, each one below the threshold that would trigger an alert. 600 here, 800 there, 1,100 in a month where they had unexpected car costs, so the number blurred in without standing out. Over 19 months, by his count, she had transferred $47,000 from their joint savings into an account he had never seen. He printed the statements. He photographed each one with his phone, time-stamped. He built a spreadsheet by date, by amount, by the pattern of which months had more activity and which had less. The heavier months aligned with his travel schedule, weeks when he was on site in Raleigh or Richmond, when she knew he would not be reviewing the account closely. That was not accident. That was calendar management. He forwarded 3 months of his own emails to a secure account he had kept separate from anything shared. He downloaded the full account history going back 4 years, not 19 months, 4 years, and scanned it for anything he might have missed the first time. He found 2 more accounts he did not recognize, smaller ones, accounts where money had moved in and then out again in a direction he could not immediately follow. He noted them. He would have someone follow them. He opened a new folder on his laptop and named it simply Documentation. He moved through the house that afternoon like a man who lived there and had no particular opinion about it. He made dinner from scratch, chicken, rice, the kind of meal that required time and attention, because time and attention were what he had, and he was not going to waste them on panic. He set the table. He arranged the glasses. When she came home, he asked her about the shower, listened to her answer, refilled her water glass without being asked. She told him it was wonderful. He told her he was glad. He watched her over dinner. Not with suspicion written on his face, he had practiced the expression of ordinary interest too long to let anything breach it now, but with the particular attention of a man who was cataloging. The way she checked her phone twice and then put it face down on the table as a performance of not checking it. The new bracelet on her right wrist, silver, a style he had not seen before, which she had not mentioned. The specific way she laughed at something he said that told him she was elsewhere behind the laugh. He collected these observations the way he collected data points on a structural survey. Individually, they were notes. Together, they were a load calculation. Together, they told you whether the thing would hold or fall. Some things you did not say. Not yet. The next morning, he called his lawyer, Patricia Okonkwo, a woman he had worked with on contract disputes for 6 years. She had a voice like a closing argument, and a mind like an organized filing cabinet, and when he laid the documentation on her desk, she did not flinch. She spread the pages out, reviewed them in order, looked up once. "She didn't know about your secondary holdings," Patricia said. It was not a question. "No," he said. "Good," she said. "Let's make sure it stays that way until we need it not to." The secondary holdings were a matter of 4 years of disciplined, careful structure. Marcus had made his first significant money on a bridge retrofit commission in Virginia, a federal contract that paid substantially more than his usual residential work. He had put that money into an LLC, had used the LLC to invest in a small commercial property, had used the property to secure a line of credit that funded the next acquisition. He had been methodical about it, in the same way he was methodical about everything. No steps skipped, no corners cut, no structure built on a foundation it could not support. Danielle had been present for all of this in the same way a person was present in a house where things were being built in a room they never entered. She did not ask about the LLC. She did not ask about the commercial properties. She had not asked about the trust document that his financial advisor, a quiet, precise man named Leonard Stokes, who had worked with Marcus's late uncle, had helped him establish 4 years prior, which placed his primary business assets in a structure that predated the marriage and was therefore, by the clear reading of North Carolina law, entirely his. Patricia reviewed the trust documentation next. She looked up a second time. "Marcus," she said, in the tone of a woman who had seen many things and was seeing something particular, "they were planning to file before you could." She laid a printed email on the table between them. It had come from Danielle's personal account to Garrett Forsythe's work address. It referenced a consultation with a divorce attorney. The date on the email was 16 months ago. His face remained perfectly calm. He picked it up. He read it. He set it back down. "All right," he said. "What do we need to do first?" Real power operated in quiet rooms. His uncle Raymond was 67 and had a workshop of his own in Rock Hill, just across the state line, where he built furniture by hand and kept counsel that cost nothing and was worth everything. Marcus drove down on a Saturday, told him the shape of it without the details, and Raymond listened the way old men listened, completely, without interrupting, with both hands flat on the work table. When Marcus finished, Raymond was quiet for a moment. "You've got the documents," he said. "I've got everything. Then you know what you're doing." Raymond turned a cabinet hinge over in his hand. "Your Uncle Earl made the mistake of showing his hand when he was still holding it. Didn't serve him. You're your grandmother's, though. You know when to wait." He handed Marcus the hinge. A small thing, solid. Marcus put it in his jacket pocket and drove home. The forensic accountant Patricia had brought in, a woman named Stacy Bruton, who worked white-collar financial fraud cases for a living, spent 2 weeks on the records and delivered a 23-page summary with footnotes. What she found on Garrett Forsythe's side of the ledger was considerably more interesting than anyone had expected. And Stacy Bruton did not use words like interesting lightly. He had run a similar scheme in 2 prior relationships. Both had ended with settlements out of court. A woman in Raleigh, a woman in Columbia. In each case, he had cultivated a relationship with someone who had access to a household account, had positioned himself as an investment advisor of sorts, informal, never licensed, and had received transfers over the course of the relationship that were later characterized in the settlements as gifts. He had a judgment against him in Mecklenburg County, a civil matter from a creditor, unpaid and accruing. His commercial real estate firm was 18 months behind on a note held by a regional bank, which had already sent a notice of intent to accelerate. The Porsche, Stacy noted at the end of her report, in the flat tone of someone delivering a cause of death, was leased. The man Danielle Parrish Hale had chosen to replace Marcus Hale with was not a visionary. He was a liability, dressed in a Porsche. Marcus read the report on a Thursday morning in Patricia's conference room and sat with it for a moment before setting it down. She didn't know any of this, he said. Almost certainly not, Patricia said. That doesn't help her legally. No, Patricia agreed. It doesn't. He filed it. Preparation was the work. Raymond had given him something else, too, over that workshop table in Rock Hill. An observation that Marcus had turned over in his mind several times since. The thing about a man who builds for show, Raymond said, running a hand along a cabinet door's edge, is that the inside is always hollow. Looks good standing still. Apply any real pressure, though. Door swings wrong. Joint opens up, and you see right through it. He had closed the cabinet door gently. The work tells you. In the 3 weeks between engaging Patricia and the night of the reunion, Marcus went home each evening and lived inside his marriage, the way a man lived inside a building he knew was scheduled for controlled demolition. He ate dinner. He asked about her day. He listened to her answers in the way that required no particular effort anymore. The way you listened to ambient sound, present but not absorbing. He watched her practice her explanations for questions that had not yet been asked. She was performing for an audience that only existed in her own head. One evening she mentioned the Asheville project, and he described it in some detail, and she nodded and said the right things about it, and he noticed that she did not ask how it was being financed or through which entity. And he understood that the gap between what she thought she knew and what was actually true was wider than she had ever thought to measure. The reunion invitation had come to both of them. They were technically graduated from the same class, had met there, and the committee had sent paper invites to the last known address. And Danielle had mentioned it over dinner one Tuesday, like it was nothing. She was planning to go. She assumed he would not bother. He told her he might stop by. She looked at him in a way that meant she was revising something privately, recalculating, deciding whether that created a problem. Sure, she said. It could be fun. He drove. The Jefferson Crown Hotel had a grand ballroom that the Alumni Association had rented for the occasion, and it was full by 8 o'clock with people who had grown into and out of and sideways from who they once were. Marcus arrived at 8:15 in a black suit he had not worn to a reunion before. He left the Bugatti with the valet without ceremony, took the ticket, pocketed it, and walked inside. He found his table near the back. He sat. He got the punch. He saw Danielle across the room at 9. She saw him too, and she made her choice, publicly and clearly, the way some people make choices when they have decided they have already won. She crossed the room toward a cluster of women she had been friends with in school, and she said something, and they all looked at him. And one of them laughed, and Danielle laughed, and a man nearby, Marcus recognized him from photographs, Garrett Forsythe, taller than expected, gold watch, put his hand on the small of her back. At 9:40, the DJ stopped the music for a brief program. A committee member with a microphone invited people to share memories and updates. Danielle took the microphone. She spoke about herself for 2 minutes. Her career, her new chapter, the renovations on the house she now lived in alone. Then, she made a joke. It was structured in the shape of a compliment, an acknowledgement of how some of her classmates had really made something of themselves. And then it pivoted, and the pivot landed on quiet Marcus in the back, with his plastic cup of punch. And the room laughed, and she smiled, and the microphone hummed. She handed it back. Marcus stood up. He walked to the committee member. He asked if he might say a few words. The committee member, surprised and pleased, handed him the microphone. He did not speak immediately. He waited for the room to settle. He was comfortable with silence in a way that took years to build. "Most of you knew me as Quiet Marcus," he said. "Some of you still do." He paused. "I'm a structural engineer. What that means practically is that I build things meant to hold weight under pressure. I've been doing that a long time." Another pause. "I also own the company." He said it without emphasis, as a simple organizing fact. "Actually," he said, "I own 3 of them. The primary entity is registered as Hale Structure and Development, LLC. Most of our work is commercial. We completed the Meridian Commons project downtown last year. Those of you who drive on Independence have seen it." He looked around the room. Some people had their phones out now. Some people were very still. "We're currently under contract for an 11-acre mixed-use development on the east side that will break ground in the spring. The projected contract value is $47 million. The room was quiet. "I mention all of this," Marcus said, "because I believe in accuracy. And the picture that got painted here tonight of who I am was not accurate." He looked at Danielle once. Only once. "I don't hold that against anyone. People see what they decide to see." He held up his valet ticket. "My car is outside if anyone would like a more complete picture. I'll be here another 20 minutes. He set the microphone down on the nearest table. His hands did not shake. He walked back to his seat and finished his punch. And behind him the ballroom rearranged itself the way rooms did when something tilted, and across the floor Garrett Forsythe had gone very still, and Danielle Parrish Hale stood with a champagne glass in one hand, and an expression on her face that Marcus recognized from structural assessments, the moment the engineer identified the load-bearing failure and understood that the building was already falling, had been in the process of falling before anyone in the room had heard the sound. Patricia Okonkwo was seated in a chair in the lobby. She had a leather portfolio on her lap and a look of composed patience. Marcus had asked her to be there not for confrontation, but for documentation. A witness with credentials to what had been said and how it had been received. He sat beside her. She handed him a sealed envelope. "Service was confirmed this morning," she said. "He was served at his office at noon." Marcus nodded. The civil filing against Garrett Forsythe for his role in a financial scheme that had used Danielle as an unwitting vehicle to shift assets during a marriage was a secondary matter. The primary filing, the divorce petition, and the accompanying asset disclosures had gone to Danielle's attorney of record 2 days prior. She had known. She had chosen to come to the reunion anyway. Some people believed that if they held their chin up long enough, the ground would raise itself to meet their feet. He was not angry. He was clear. Those were different things. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and said goodnight to Patricia. He walked through the lobby doors, handed the ticket to the valet, and stood at the top of the steps while they brought the car around. It came to the bottom of the steps under the hotel lights. Dark blue, almost black. Low to the ground, in the way of something designed to remind you that speed and intention were the same thing at the right application. The valet held the door. Marcus descended the steps without hurrying and got in, and did not look back at the hotel entrance where he could feel, without seeing, a cluster of people who had found their way outside. He drove home through Charlotte with the windows down and the city lights moving past like things he had already built and documented and moved on from. 9 months later, Marcus sat on the back porch of the house in Dilworth with coffee in the same French press mug and morning light coming in low across the garden he had put in himself. A Japanese maple at the far end, tomato plants heavy with fruit along the fence. A small raised bed of herbs that a woman named Celeste had asked if she could plant last spring and then proceeded to tend with more care than he had expected. Celeste was a civil attorney who specialized in housing law. She had met him at a professional conference, asked him a precise and interesting question about structural load limits and affordable housing design, and they had talked for 40 minutes without either of them performing anything. She was in the kitchen now, making eggs, and she did not announce herself, and he did not expect her to. That was its own kind of architecture, the kind that held without noise. The development on the east side had broken ground in March. He had stood in the site's mud at 7 in the morning and watched the first excavation and thought of his grandmother's kitchen table and the way she said what she said. Slow hands build the thing that stands. He had heard, through Leonard Stokes, who had heard it through a mutual acquaintance, that Garrett Forsyth had reached a settlement on the civil matter and relocated to a smaller city somewhere in Ohio. His commercial real estate firm had dissolved. The banknote had been called. He had heard, through Patricia, that Danielle was working in a marketing coordinator role for a mid-sized property management company in Gastonia. Her attorney had filed a response to the divorce petition that claimed an interest in assets the trust documentation made entirely unavailable to her. The court had disagreed. The final judgment had been issued 4 months after the reunion. Her mother had reached out to Marcus once, by email, a brief note of apology and an expression of embarrassment that Marcus had read once and filed. He had not replied, but he did not feel the need to. Some debts were settled without requiring anyone to present the invoice in person. The morning light caught the dew on the grass he had resodded himself the prior fall, and the Japanese maple held its leaves in the still air, and Celeste's voice came through the kitchen screen, asking if he wanted his eggs scrambled or fried, and he said scrambled. And she said good choice, and he sat for another moment, with the mug warm in both hands. He had built everything worth keeping. He was free. He was solvent. He was unbothered. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.